the story surrounding Tommy Lee Jones's daughter didn't suddenly begin on New Year's Day. It had been quietly unfolding for months, largely outside public view. What makes this case so complex isn't a single headline or one isolated incident, but a series of documented encounters, court filings, and unresolved questions that only resurfaced after her death. Today, we're not here to speculate or sensationalize, but to carefully trace what was publicly known, what resurfaced later, and why certain details are now being re-examined. Because when pieces of a timeline emerge after the fact, they often change how the entire story is understood. And this one raises a question that many people are now asking privately. How close was help really? The moment that brought this story into national attention came in the early hours of January 1st, when emergency responders were called to the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. According to publicly available information, a woman identified as Victoria Jones was found unresponsive shortly after New Year's celebrations. She was pronounced deceased at the scene. Authorities stated that no foul play was suspected, and at the time of reporting, an official cause of death had not yet been released. Out of respect for the family and ongoing procedures, details were limited. But as media outlets began reviewing court records and prior reports, a broader context started to emerge. This wasn't the first time Victoria Jones's name had appeared in official documents. Court records from Napa County indicate that in April of the previous year, deputies conducted a welfare check at a residence on Las Amigas Road. According to those records, officers were responding to concerns rather than a criminal investigation. During that interaction, documents state that Victoria reportedly admitted to using cocaine. Law enforcement later noted that a small plastic bag believed to contain a controlled substance was found during booking procedures. She was subsequently charged, though she pleaded not guilty to the allegations. It's important to note that these details come from court filings and spokesperson statements, not from conclusions drawn after her death. And this April incident was not isolated. Public records show that law enforcement had contact with Victoria Jones multiple times throughout the year, each instance reflecting a pattern of concern rather than escalation. In February, deputies responded to a call involving a domestic dispute at the same Napa County residence. The caller reportedly asked that no charges be filed, instead requesting documentation of the incident. Then, months later in June, deputies were called to a luxury resort in Napa following a reported altercation. According to a sheriff's spokesperson, the individuals involved were the same as those referenced in the earlier February report. Again, these incidents did not result in long-term detention. But together, they painted a picture of someone navigating ongoing personal struggles, many of which were already documented before January. In the weeks leading up to New Year's Day, Victoria Jones was, according to court records, at a crossroads that rarely makes headlines. The plea deal offered to her was not punitive in nature. Prosecutors had reportedly structured it around treatment rather than incarceration. If accepted, it would have required supervised rehabilitation, compliance with sobriety conditions, and continued court oversight. Legal sources later described the agreement as an opportunity designed to interrupt a cycle, not to criminalize it. A pretrial conference had been scheduled for late January. This was the moment when the deal would likely have been finalized. Instead, the legal process stopped entirely. With her passing, the case was automatically dismissed. For observers, this detail reframed the story, not as a sudden tragedy, but as one that unfolded while intervention was actively in motion. And this wasn't the only legal matter she was navigating. Public records show that Victoria was also dealing with a separate misdemeanor case in Santa Cruz County related to an alleged public intoxication incident months earlier. Another case from June involved a misdemeanor domestic battery allegation tied to an argument that reportedly centered on substance use. Each case on its own might have appeared minor. Together, they illustrated a pattern of repeated contact with authorities, not for high-profile crimes, but for welfare checks, disputes, and substance-related concerns. This distinction matters because it suggests that what unfolded was not hidden, ignored, or invisible, but difficult to resolve. Addiction, as experts often point out, does not move in straight lines. Progress and relapse can exist side by side. Legal pressure and family support don't always align in timing or effectiveness. And in this case, timing appears to be the most painful variable. On New Year's Eve, According to witness accounts later referenced by media outlets, Victoria was not alone. A small group had reportedly gathered to mark the start of the year. What happened in the hours that followed remains partially unclear. Emergency responders were called shortly before 3 a.m. Dispatch audio later described a medical emergency involving a possible overdose, though officials cautioned that such language reflects urgency, not final conclusions. When paramedics arrived, they assessed the situation and declared one individual deceased. Police later stated that there were no signs of foul play and that the medical examiner would determine the cause of death. At the time of reporting, toxicology results had not been released publicly. This absence of confirmation is important. While media reports referenced witness statements and preliminary observations, authorities emphasized that the investigation remained open and conclusions should not be drawn without verified medical findings. Despite this, the public response moved quickly. News outlets revisited older interviews, resurfaced court filings, and replayed stories from her childhood acting career. But behind the headlines, the family's response was restrained and deliberate. In a brief statement, Tommy Lee Jones and his family thanked the public for their kind words and asked for privacy during a period of grief. There were no interviews, no extended comments, no attempts to control the narrative. That silence, for many, spoke louder than speculation. Because this was no longer a story about celebrity. It was about proximity. How close someone can be to help while still struggling to reach it. And it raised a broader issue rarely addressed with nuance. What happens when the systems designed to intervene, legal, medical, familial, are active but not synchronized? Now, in 2023, when Tommy Lee Jones petitioned for a temporary conservatorship, court documents reportedly described life-threatening conduct and a need for rehabilitation services unavailable in a hospital setting. That request was granted, which means this wasn't denial. It wasn't distance. It wasn't inaction. It was effort, within limits. And that's where this story becomes uncomfortable in a way that statistics can't capture. Because there is no single turning point to isolate. No obvious moment where one decision explains everything. No simple explanation that fits into a headline. Instead, there's a timeline filled with near misses, partial interventions, and postponed resolutions. A welfare check instead of an arrest. A plea deal not yet finalized. A court date scheduled, but not reached. When viewed this way, the tragedy doesn't feel sudden. It feels unfinished. When examining the story in full, it becomes clear that Victoria Jones's life cannot be reduced to headlines or brief news cycles. Her experiences, from acting alongside her father to navigating legal and personal struggles, illustrate the tension between public perception and private reality. As a child, she gained early exposure to professional filmmaking. Appearances in movies such as Men in Black 2 and The Three Burials of Melquiades. Estrada demonstrated not only talent but also discipline, as her father noted in interviews. Stories from her early career, like being woken up for a 5 a.m. call time, highlight the ordinary challenges of professional life in Hollywood, rather than sensationalized drama. Yet as adulthood progressed, public visibility decreased, and personal challenges became more apparent through official records. Multiple interactions with law enforcement, welfare checks, and legal proceedings painted a nuanced picture of someone actively struggling with substance use while under family and legal oversight. One critical element that often gets overlooked is the presence of support systems. Court filings show that her father had petitioned for conservatorship, emphasizing rehabilitation over punishment. A planned plea deal, which included mandatory treatment and sobriety compliance, represented another active effort to provide help. These were not passive interventions. They were structured attempts to create an environment where recovery could succeed. The tragedy lies in timing. The systems in place had not yet fully intersected with her personal journey. Experts on addiction emphasize that recovery is nonlinear. Relapses can occur even under supervision and support. The presence of multiple contacts with authorities and ongoing legal efforts indicates that Victoria was not abandoned, but navigating an extraordinarily difficult path that required more time, alignment, and resources than could be immediately provided. Witness statements about New Year's Eve, combined with the lack of finalized court proceedings, illustrate the uncertainty inherent in such situations. While media reports have focused on speculation about substances, It is important to highlight that the official cause of death was not publicly confirmed at the time of reporting. What can be responsibly shared is that she was found unresponsive and that authorities were involved promptly. This story resonates beyond the specifics of one individual. It challenges assumptions about intervention, visibility, and support. It forces observers to consider how timing, resources, and personal circumstance converge, sometimes in ways that headlines alone cannot capture. What resurfaced next would shift public attention even further. According to later witness statements cited by multiple outlets, an individual staying near the Fairmont Hotel claimed that Victoria had been socializing with several people in the hours leading up to her death. The witness allegedly told emergency responders that substances may have been present during those New Year's celebrations. These statements, while unverified, were included in reporting as part of the preliminary timeline. Law enforcement sources later indicated that audio recordings from the scene were being reviewed, though officials emphasized that conclusions should not be drawn prematurely. At the same time, medical examiners had not yet released toxicology results, leaving the cause of death officially undetermined. Still, one detail stood out. Court documents revealed that just weeks before her death, Victoria Jones had been offered a plea deal connected to her April arrest. According to legal filings obtained by media outlets, the proposed agreement would have allowed her to avoid incarceration in exchange for entering treatment and maintaining sobriety. She was reportedly scheduled to appear in court later that month to formalize the deal. That court date never came. For many following the case, this raised difficult questions. Not accusations, but reflections. How close was intervention? How often does help arrive just slightly too late? And what does this say about the space between legal systems, family efforts, and personal battles? At this point, the focus shifts from events to implications. Because beyond court records and headlines, Victoria Jones was also known publicly in a very different context. She appeared on screen as a child in major productions, including Men in Black 2 and the 3 Burials of Melquiades Estrada, the latter directed by her father. In interviews from that time, Tommy Lee Jones spoke openly about her talent, discipline, and early exposure to professional acting. He even shared a story about firing her once for refusing to arrive on set early, a moment often retold as a lesson in responsibility, not punishment. But as adulthood arrived, her presence in Hollywood faded. She no longer pursued acting professionally, instead appearing occasionally at film festivals and public events alongside her father. And while public appearances suggested stability, court records from recent years indicated ongoing personal challenges. Some serious enough that, in 2023, her father reportedly petitioned a court for a temporary conservatorship. According to those filings, the request cited concerns for her safety and the need for structured treatment. That petition, approved temporarily, underscores something often missed in headlines. That intervention had been attempted, and concern was documented long before January. Which brings the story to a quieter, more uncomfortable place, not one of scandal, but of systems, timing, and limits. While the immediate focus is on Victoria's final days and legal entanglements, a broader view shows that her life included a complex interplay between family, career opportunities, and personal struggles. Victoria Jones's early life was immersed in the world of film, not as a casual observer, but as someone learning the craft alongside her father, an Oscar-winning actor known for meticulous preparation. Accounts from interviews suggest that Tommy Lee Jones invested not only in her acting skills, but also in her broader education. He arranged for her to learn Spanish from an early age, emphasizing both cultural knowledge and communication skills. Such decisions reflect a long-term commitment to her growth, highlighting a supportive family environment that valued discipline and learning. Yet, balancing personal development with public life is rarely simple. Hollywood often exposes young actors to pressures that are difficult to navigate. While Victoria's early career included roles in films like Men in Black 2 and appearances in One Tree Hill, she transitioned out of acting professionally as she matured. Some reports indicate she maintained a presence in public spaces largely through attending film festivals, premieres, and events alongside her father. While these appearances projected a polished image, private struggles were simultaneously documented through public records and legal filings. Her 2023 temporary conservatorship petition underscores the tension between public perception and private reality. Court filings reveal that her father expressed concerns about life-threatening conduct and emphasized the necessity of structured rehabilitation. The filings indicate that Victoria needed access to rehabilitation services not available in a hospital, which prompted the petition. While some observers misinterpret conservatorships as restrictive or punitive, in this case, they appear to have been intended as protective, an attempt to provide support and structured care within the bounds of the legal system. Following this petition, multiple law enforcement interactions throughout 2025 paint a picture of repeated concern rather than escalating criminal behavior. For example, her April arrest in Napa County involved charges reportedly related to possession of a controlled substance, but records emphasize that officers were acting primarily in a welfare check capacity. Media coverage often highlighted the arrest without noting the context. She reportedly admitted to substance use, and the arrest came as part of a welfare check rather than a standard criminal pursuit. The narrative here is one of intervention rather than punishment. Additional encounters, including incidents in February and June, illustrate the continuity of concern. These events involved reports of altercations or disputes, but were primarily documented as misdemeanor-level incidents, often with the complainant requesting that the events be recorded rather than prosecuted. In each instance, law enforcement attempted to document circumstances, provide guidance, or respond to immediate safety concerns. Beyond legal issues, Victoria's life was interwoven with her father's professional world. Interviews and media reports reveal a relationship that combined mentorship, guidance, and familial expectations. For instance, stories about early morning calls to set demonstrate the high standards she was expected to meet as an actress. Yet Tommy Lee Jones's reflections often framed these experiences as teaching moments rather than punishment. These accounts provide insight into a family dynamic rooted in structure, expectation, and preparation for public life. This duality, public appearances versus private struggles, emerges as a recurring theme. On one hand, she participated in events such as the premiere of Just Getting Started and the Tokyo International Film Festival, often serving as her father's companion and public representative. On the other, public records indicate ongoing challenges with substance use, legal matters, and repeated interventions. This contrast highlights the complexities faced by families attempting to balance visibility, support, and personal well-being. As media attention increased following her passing, witnesses and reports offered additional context. According to statements obtained by outlets such as The Blast, Victoria was reportedly socializing with a small group in the hours preceding her death. Emergency responders documented the timeline of events at the Fairmont Hotel, noting that she was found unresponsive around 3 a.m. While some reports speculated on the presence of substances, authorities emphasized that no official cause of death had been released, and investigations remained open. This distinction is critical. Speculation should not be confused with confirmed information. The plea deal offered prior to her death adds another layer to the timeline. Legal filings suggest that the agreement was structured to prioritize rehabilitation over incarceration. If finalized, it would have required Victoria to engage in structured treatment and maintain sobriety under court supervision. Experts note that such arrangements are not uncommon for individuals struggling with substance use, as the goal is to reduce risk while providing access to professional support. Unfortunately, her passing occurred before this intervention could take effect. This intersection of legal support, family oversight, and personal struggle emphasizes the nuanced reality of addiction and intervention. Addiction specialists and social workers often point out that timing and alignment of support systems are crucial. The existence of multiple interventions in Victoria's case suggests an ongoing attempt to provide help, yet the outcome demonstrates the limits of even well-intentioned systems when factors converge unpredictably. Moreover, the public response to her passing highlights a recurring tension in celebrity narratives. Many media outlets focused on speculation about substance use, while official statements from the family emphasize privacy, reflection, and gratitude for public understanding. Tommy Lee Jones's statement thanking the public for kind words and requesting privacy underscores the importance of respecting personal space during sensitive times. Victoria Jones's story also invites reflection on broader social issues. It illustrates the challenges faced by families and legal systems when addressing substance-related struggles. particularly in high-pressure environments. Her experiences underscore the need for patience, coordination, and sustained support, elements that often receive little attention in media coverage, but are critical for understanding outcomes. Ultimately, this story is less about scandal and more about complexity. Victoria Jones's life encompassed talent, early promise, public appearances, and personal challenges. Legal filings and family interventions illustrate attempts at help, even when outcomes were not as hoped. The lesson is not simple, but it is important. Progress and support do not always follow a straight line. Timing, coordination, and circumstances matter profoundly, often beyond public view. For viewers, the takeaway lies in reflection, understanding, empathy, and awareness of the nuances behind publicized events. And while this chapter is closed, it raises questions for future consideration. How can systems, families, and communities better align to provide timely support? What can public observation teach us about balancing curiosity with respect? How do early interventions intersect with personal autonomy and privacy? For those following this story, a deeper exploration of timelines, legal processes, and family involvement can help contextualize the events without sensationalism. In our next video, we will take a closer look at the broader context of interventions in personal crises, examining what records and legal procedures reveal about timing, support systems, and missed opportunities, always in a responsible, ad-safe, and factual manner. Because understanding the full story matters more than a headline.